In today's episode of Quick Chat, I speak to Gareth Case, Senior Vice President of Marketing at Pocona, who shares his journey into marketing, discussing the evolution of B2B marketing, the importance of aligning sales and marketing, and the strategies behind successful exits in his previous companies. He also highlights his role at Pocona, the impact of innovative tactics, and the future of marketing through automation and data-driven strategies. If you found this video helpful, leave a like, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Appreciate you being here, Gareth. Really appreciate your time joining this podcast. I'm really curious to start from the top. What initially sparked your interest in marketing, and how did you find yourself in this career?
Good question, and thanks for having me today. I guess like many 16-year-olds, I left school with no idea what I wanted to do when I left, and I ended up studying business for 2 years at college.
Okay.
That was an interesting one for me. There were 10 or 12 different modules within that course. One of them was on marketing, and another was on marketing communications, and they were the only two that I really enjoyed doing. Coupled that with having a really good tutor in that area as well.
Right.
So then I left college, went and got a temporary job as a marketing assistant within a global tech business called Intermec, and
Yep.
spent the first 5 years of my career there learning everything from being trained in graphic design to campaign management and
Wow.
execution. It was just a really, really good period for me and a great way to start my career. So I got very lucky with my first job. Then moved from there into the software business in the space, and I've spent probably the last 20 or so years leading global marketing teams across a variety of tech businesses, PE-backed, publicly listed and private organizations. So that's where I've got to, how I've got to where I am today.
Absolutely, and that sounds really interesting. I guess I'd be keen to know how does the practical side of marketing compare to the theory that you learned in college?
I've always had quite a strong opinion on this one. So, if I look at a lot of the courses that are out there today, it's almost impossible for them to keep up with the trends that are happening in
Yeah.
marketing. So, take the advent of AI over the last few years. How
hmm
can, someone that's running a course on marketing keep up with the changes? There's seemingly new disciplines or new areas of marketing that are cropping up on a daily, weekly basis. So, yes, there's some of the theoretical stuff around the 4Ps. I think there's probably more than 20 Ps now, depending on who you ask. That's grown exponentially, but some of the theory stuff is still very, very relevant today. But as I said, it's a really changing and evolving world. So I'd urge all your listeners to do as much homework and research and that, on their own behalf as well.
And just on that, obviously the world of marketing has evolved. I guess I'd love to know how your passion for marketing has evolved as well over the last few years since you've been in industry.
It's never really changed, to be honest. As I said, I kind of got into it at 16 when I went through that business studies course, and that was very much sort of B2C focused.
hmm
I thought at the time I wanted to be the CMO of Nike. In fact, secretly, I probably still do. But I got thrust into a very technical business very quickly.
Right.
And this was a B2B organization with a channel that they sold through. So a completely different market to the one that I thought I was going into. What I
hmm
love about it is I think personally that B2B is the hardest form of any kind of marketing. Getting decision makers to spend millions of pounds on, IT-based solutions is very different to getting a consumer to choose Coke over Pepsi, for example. So
Absolutely.
there's a lot more kind of science to it, I think.
hmm
And it's that stuff that just keeps me energized and keeps me interested.
Oh, that's really interesting and really cool to hear. I guess just on that B2B side as well, then, I'd love to know a bit more about what Pocona do and what challenges you guys solve.
Cool. So Percona, for those that haven't heard of the business, we're an open source database solutions organization. We've been around for around 18 years, and we
Okay.
basically help large scale organizations solve complex challenges they've got with their database environment. So in terms of what value we add to those customers, primary one is cost optimization. So dramatically reducing the cost of database licenses with some of the providers that are out there. Also enabling them to avoid things like vendor lock-in, which a lot of the customers that we bring on board have experienced in terms of some of their challenges and pain points.
hmm
But also providing true expert services. So whether that's support or professional services or managed services, we've got an excellent team of people that understand all those environments, whether it's MySQL or MongoDB or Postgres. We've got
Yeah.
offerings and services and support in all of those areas. So yeah, that's a little bit about Pocona, growing aggressively at the moment, and we've got some big plans for the future as well.
Amazing. And I'm sure we're going to touch on those plans as well. You mentioned a few vendors and some of your offerings too. I'd love to know almost how you've kind of developed the positioning statement of the company and how you differentiate yourself from some of those competitors.
Well, the open source message is probably the main one there. So, a lot of the people that we compete with will charge pretty large and hefty bills for licenses to their software. We're open source, which means our software is available, without a charge for those end user customers. And what that means is we can really leverage the community as well to build upon that. Um, and then, from a vendor point of view, we mentioned large scale organizations earlier. A lot of these organizations are running more than one of those database environments. So
Sure.
if they're going to go and work on a MySQL project or a Mongo project, they may go and work with Mongo on that. But if they've got a Postgres environment
Hmm.
or a MariaDB environment, Pocona is one of the few organizations out there that can actually support them across that multitude of different environments. So yeah, we're relatively uniquely positioned in that space, and we lean heavily on the expertise that we've got within our business.
Amazing. And I guess you've been at Pocona for, I think it's just shy of 8 weeks now. I'd love for you to almost walk me through your strategy that you've put in place and almost explain to me a bit more about the processes that you use to define this strategy.
That's a good question. So we're in the midst of that right now. You can imagine it's been a very busy 8 weeks. My
Sure.
main focus at the moment is getting the marketing and the kind of go to market engine properly match fit for January 1, so we can kick off next year with a bang, but at the same time delivering tactically against our Q4 objectives as well. So there's always that kind of blend. In terms
Yeah.
of how we're approaching it, the first thing that I always do when I join a new business is let's start with the customer. So what does that ideal customer look like? So defining that ICP,
Hmm.
and we've spent some time looking through firmographic, technographic data, looked at some historical sales data and marketing data as well to get some real clarity around what our ideal audience looks like. So we've got that in place now in terms of who we want to go after. Next
Hmm.
stage is then to define what your total addressable market looks like, and that's a hard one, right? You need to
Sure.
rely on external data sources to be able to come up with that. And I've used everything in the past from Zoom Info to Apollo and all the different tools that most marketers use. We've
Hmm.
recently settled on an intent platform, which is really going to help us shape what that audience looks like and be able
Okay.
to not only segment the audience down by persona, by all the firmographic and technographic data, but also start to show us some intent in terms of when they're looking to buy, what their propensity to buy is, so that we can start to prioritize sales and marketing follow up. Um, Personas I touched on. I think personas are really important.
Yeah.
We've done some good work on that in the past at Pocona, but there are others that we're developing at the moment. And this is really about getting across that buying committee within our target prospects. You can't just focus in on the guy that looks after the IT budget anymore,
Yeah.
or the girl that looks after the IT budget anymore. You need to influence the people that hold the purse strings, or the people that are running the operational part of the organization as well. So we're doing some work around further developing some of that stuff. Then it's around proposition development. So how do we sell the value of what Percona's doing to each of those different audiences? And then tactically, how do we go after them? Do we have an ABM approach for a subset of the top prospects that we want to go after? Do we couple that with a broad brush approach? Where do we spend from a digital perspective versus an offline perspective? So we're going through all of that kind of stuff at the moment and really mapping out what good looks like. And as part of that process, it's looking at our ABM strategy, looking at our lead management strategy, looking at our lead management processes and making sure they're fit for purpose and that we're
Hmm.
getting the right leads to the right salespeople in the organization at the right time. And agreeing things like SLAs with the sales organization. If we give you a lead, we want it followed up within 15 minutes or 5 days, whatever that looks like.
Absolutely.
And just getting some of those processes in place. And then the final part, I guess, to that strategy is just to continue to test and refine everything that we do. We're lucky, I think, now more than ever in terms of the access to data that we've got from a marketing point of view.
Hmm.
So the key is not just being able to collect that data, it's to be able to interrogate it, get some real insights out of it, and then improve and refine what you're doing moving forward so that results continually get better.
You mentioned quite a few interesting stuff that I'd love to unpack from that, especially in terms of the buying teams and how it's not just the guy or the girl that's running the IT team that you need to convince, it's also potentially the CFO as well. How do you develop the strategy when you're writing your messaging to resonate with those different stakeholders in the business that you're trying to target?
I think it comes back to that value statement again. Why is
Hmm.
someone spending lots of money with an organization? They're spending money to fix a problem that they've got. and that
Right.
problem may be different depending on which department you're in that organization. So if we take Pocona as a good example, we've got an excellent story around cost optimization or cost reduction on IT spend.
Hmm.
That isn't necessarily going to resonate with the person running IT. They want a robust, database environment and robust support and managed services off the back of that to make sure nothing goes down, because that's what
Hmm.
loses their pet job ultimately. But the
Yeah.
finance person, whether it's a CFO or a finance director, they're going to be tasked with financial metrics, and one of those may be reducing costs for their external vendors or whatever else. So when it comes to us
Mhm.
building a value proposition out, it's, what key messages do those people really care about? And you need to do some proper research on that. We've used external third-party research companies before who will go out and speak to 100 CFOs, 500 CFOs, find out what's most important around this kind of stuff, and then we can start to craft our messaging. But there's a lot of thought that goes into getting the messaging right for sure.
Absolutely. And then when you're looking at the kind of strategies that you're putting in place, whether it's ABM or kind of your classic demand generation, what are the considerations that you make when settling on a decision like that?
Um, we always start with what is it going to deliver, right? Or what do we need to deliver? So I think a common mistake I still see marketing teams making today is they're not closely integrated enough with the sales organization and the
Okay.
go-to-market function as a whole. So one of the first things I always do when I join a new job is, let's get the partnership between sales and marketing sorted, get the relationship built, get the joint objectives agreed, and again, you see so often where marketing's got a target and sales have got a target, and they end up running. And the longer that goes on, if they're running in different directions, you end up at the end of the year and you're miles away from where you need to be.
Yeah.
So, I've made some agreements already with the Percona sales leadership that we're going to go into next year with joint targets. It's not an us versus them; it's a sales and marketing combined effort, and we'll take joint responsibility for that. So, starting with that number is really important, and then we've got the metrics now to be able to work backwards, right? If we need to hit 100 million, then we know how many opportunities and SALs and MQLs and
Hmm.
leads we need to hit those numbers based on all of the data that we've been collecting for years now. The job of a good marketing leader is actually how do we move the needle on some of those conversion metrics? Because if we see a 10% or a 20% increase on some of those, that has a
Hmm.
either has a dramatic effect at the end in terms of the pipeline we're generating, or
Yeah.
it has a dramatic impact on the amount of money we need to spend to get the same result. And
Right.
if you can do both of those things, you really get a kind of multiplier effect.
Absolutely. And I always hear that sales and marketing alignment is a really tricky piece to get right. And I guess from your experience, what are the kind of tactics that you use on a more sort of day-to-day or weekly basis to make sure that sales and marketing are aligned? You mentioned the final number, but how does that work in practice?
It sounds stupid, but just talk to these guys, like
Sure.
spend time with them and spend time with their team, and spend time on customer calls so that you can hear what's happening with the customers and the prospects that they're dealing with, so you can start to
Hmm.
understand the challenge. Again, so many marketing teams I've seen in the past, they're just not connected to that customer or that prospect
Right.
experience. So, we've got some really good technology in our business that records all of our sales calls. I'm actively
Hmm.
encouraging my team to go and listen to them, go and hear what's going on in the market. But partnering, and if you're going to go into a relationship with a sales organization and you're going to commit to delivering certain things, make sure you deliver on those things. And if you don't, have a good reason why you haven't done. Don't just stay silent and, sorry, we had a poor quarter this month, this quarter and we haven't hit it. Let's work together to see how we can get back on track. So it's all about the human level of that relationship, in my opinion. If you get that
Hmm.
bit right, then most of the other challenges are quite easy to unpick.
Sure. No, that makes complete sense. So you've obviously previously had quite a few successful exits. I'd love for you to walk me through the role that marketing had in those exits and in maximizing really the company's valuation.
Yeah, sure. So a couple of different ones actually there. So the first one was probably back in 2015.
Okay.
I joined a company called Exchanging, who are a BPO, business process outsourcing organization, based in the UK, back in 2012, and they had an insurance software business as part of their offering. So it was like an incubator business within the Exchanging brand. I
Mhm.
inherited, I think, a team of two when I joined the business, and 5 years later, we had a team of 38 in marketing. So they invested in what I was doing because we were demonstrating strong results, and I think we grew the budget from 2 million to 10 million a year in that period as well.
Wow.
What actually ended up happening there, CSC, so a company called Computer Sciences Corp, who are a big American IT outsourcing organization, they acquired Exchanging for $550 million,
Wow.
just around the end of my tenure there, and 350 million of that 550 was attributable to the software business that would help kind of grow and relaunch the brand and relaunch the offerings there.
Hmm.
since then, the Zuba insurance software business has gone from strength to strength. So today, it's under the DXC technology banner. So DXC is the
Yeah.
culmination of the old Computer Sciences Corp and HP Enterprise Services. And the job there was really to take this new cool brand. They'd re-architected the product from the ground up and launch it into what is a relatively small geographical market, but a huge global market, which is commercial property and casualty insurance, essentially.
Right.
We had a very rare luxury that nearly all of our customer base, for the UK at least, was within a square mile.
Wow. Okay.
And that enabled us to do some really cool stuff from a brand point of view that you just can't do when your audience is more dispersed than that. So yeah, it was around launching the brand, around aggressively growing revenue for that part of the business. And I'm sure your listeners will know that from a valuation point of view, there's much more value created in a software business with recurring revenue than there is in a services business on an ACV type revenue model. So that was really the driver behind them wanting to bring someone new into marketing, for them investing in the marketing team to grow this business to get that overall exchange in valuation up before an exit.
And could you unpack a bit for me what you mean by brand and the kind of brand strategy that you put in place for that?
Sure, I'll talk to you a little bit about that campaign because it's the one, and it still makes me smile. We said this when we did our call a couple of weeks ago. It makes me smile thinking about it because it was one of the coolest things I've done in my career. So it was a real blend of in-person events, outdoor media, guerrilla marketing, and a full-on sort of integrated digital approach.
Wow.
Talking through some of the tactics, and given the fact our audience were in that small square mile around
Mhm.
Bank in London, that anyone's familiar with it, we did a complete takeover of Bank Underground Tube Station with all of these ads on the day we were launching, so 16th of October. I
Mhm.
remember it well.
Mhm.
We'd already worked out that 95% of our audience came through that station on a day in, day
Wow.
out basis. So
Okay.
we had a whole month of full blown, brand new, really aggressive, kind of creative and really disruptive and bold messaging. And for those that don't know, the commercial insurance industry started in the Lloyd's coffee shop, which is now directly placed underneath the Lloyd's building, which is the famous silver building in the city. And
Okay.
so, as part of the launch of this new software business, we kind of brought coffee back as a theme and as part of our campaign. So we hired like 100 baristas and had them making coffee in some underground location just around the corner from the Lloyd's building, and then sent droves of people dressed in Zuba outfits out, delivering coffee to people on their way to work to try and get the kind of brand out there as well.
Wow.
We did branded double-decker buses, which we were driving around the square mile and then going and parking outside all of our key prospects' offices for the day until we got tickets and told them to move on. We did a kind of viral flash mob experience in Leadenhall Market, which, again, for those that don't know, is the kind of epicenter of lunchtime drinking for the insurance crowd. So we did some
Mhm.
sort of outdoor cool activity there, and there's tons of videos on YouTube if anyone wants to look it up. We did some other innovative stuff. So I think we were the first company in the world, maybe the second company in the world to do video brochures. So if you haven't
Okay.
seen those, it's the ones that get posted. You open it up and there's a screen inside and it plays. And we're going back to like 2013 now. So
Sure.
that was really innovative when that came out as well. And then obviously coupled that with hyper personalized digital brand awareness campaigns. So we did full takeovers of all the major insurance publications homepages. Real personalized campaigns on LinkedIn. We hammered Google pay per click for that period of time as well, so that we were just everywhere. If you were in the insurance industry for that sort of
You
three to
couldn't have
six
missed it.
period, you kind of couldn't have avoided us. Um,
Wow.
and it's that all kind of culminated into a launch event which took place at the end of October, and we had 220 people sat there listening to what this new insurance business is, and we'd kind of teased it in a way where we didn't let too much out beforehand. So it was come to the event and find out. And to this day, it's the only event I think I've ever run where we had too many people for the room. We had to turn people away. There were 220 C-level executives in a room that was fit for about 150, and people queuing around the block to get in. So, the result of that was that Zuba really sort of catapulted itself into being a leader in the insurance software market, and obviously driving that huge enterprise value for exchanging as well.
I see a lot of these kind of guerrilla tactics in B2C companies, but I don't see a lot of them with B2B. Why do you think that is?
Look, if we'd turned up in Manchester and done it, then no one would have had any idea what we were doing and why we were there. As I said
Sure.
to you earlier, we had our audience. I mean, again, I don't know how familiar you are with the city, but there's a place called Leadenhall Market,
Hmm.
and it's got a couple of bars in there, and the entire insurance industry just swamps it at lunchtime. They drink their beer, they eat their sandwiches, and then they go back to work. So it's very, very rare that you can have so much of your audience concentrated in such a small space, which is why that worked so well. It was actually we did a Christmas campaign there as well, and another guerrilla marketing effort where it was another flash mob. We took the runners up, I think, of Britain's Got Talent, who were a gospel choir,
Okay.
and out of nowhere, next to the big Christmas tree in Leadenhall Market, one of the girls started singing "All I Want for Christmas" by Mariah Carey, and then all these other members of the band sort of just come out of the bars and the shops with their instruments and they start playing, and it was just a great sort of feel good thing. And then we sent those guys round to all of our customers' offices and put on a carol concert for them late into the night that night, and I still have people talking about it today in terms of those customers, and I'm still smiling about it today, like 10, 12.
Yeah. I mean, I don't blame you. It's honestly one of the most innovative things I've heard from a B2B setting, at least anyway. So that's pretty cool. I'd love to know as well about the other exit that you had and sort of what role you played in that.
Sure. So that was a bit of a different one. That was with my most recent employer, Red Store. So
Mhm.
they're a data backup and recovery business. I joined recently after they had taken on their first private equity backing.
Okay.
And part of that backing was to ramp up marketing and grow the brand. So spent sort of 3, 4 years doing that, and then we exited from that PE firm, and the job was then to go and find another one. And I was actually heavily involved in that process. So involved in pitching to all of the private equity firms to try and get that initial piece of interest. I
Hmm.
think there were 28 meetings that took place with 28 different firms, and then
Wow.
seconds and thirds and fourth meetings with many of them. It was just a really, really good experience. And part of what marketing was responsible there for was actually highlighting what the opportunity was for the next set of investors. And
Hmm.
we were a UK founded company with 95, 96% UK concentrated customer base,
Right.
and some in South Africa as well, actually, because that's where a lot of our employees were. Very little customer base outside of that. So part of the job was to show the expansion opportunity predominantly into the North American market. And as part of my role, I actually ended up moving to the US for 2 years to help take the Red Store brand there, hired a sales team, hired a marketing team, found offices, all the stuff that a kind of typical startup mentality would do. And it was a great 2 years for me there. And the business is going from strength to strength in North America and globally now as well.
Well, that's amazing. And you mentioned almost showcasing that potential in North America. Were there specific statistics that you had to bring in to to ensure that the investors were going to believe your potential proposition?
Yeah, so it was a kind of a two-pronged approach. So the second prong of it, which I didn't mention in the last question, was we were actually changing our product strategy and our go-to-market strategy as well. So if you think about traditional backup and recovery technologies, it's normally on a box in a data center somewhere. If something
Sure.
fails, then you fail over to the new box, or you recover data from the other box that's sat in a DC. Red
Hmm.
Store's model was always cloud first, so we were online to sort of start with, if you like, and we went down the road of developing a product led growth strategy where people could go to our website, download the software, and start billing through the software. So that was completely innovative at the time. No one else was doing that kind of model for the managed service provider community. So that was part of the pitch to the private equity companies, is that we've got a new way to sell and a new go to market strategy. In terms of
Right.
proving why the US market, again, it was a little bit lucky that the market in the US is almost an identical replica of the UK market in terms of
Sure.
the challenges that these guys are facing and the competitors. It wasn't like, we didn't know how to position or message this because we were up against the same people selling to very similar personas and similar organizations. The fact of the matter is the market's 12 times the size. So we did some
Yeah.
research. We used companies like IDC and Gartner and Forrester to get some market data and look at what that looks like as part of the decision making process for going over there. But yeah, there's a couple of things on that one there.
No, I appreciate that, Gareth. No, that sounds really interesting, and I'm sure a lot of people that are thinking about expanding to new markets would learn quite a bit from that. I guess from what you've mentioned, you've obviously worked in quite a few different industries and with different sized budgets. Given that marketers or a lot of the marketers that I speak to almost complain a lot that they're constrained with budget, time, and resource, how have you personally managed to deliver consistent results despite all of these constraints?
Who said I have? there's,
Fair
there's the first answer. I think
enough.
the budget thing's a little bit of a myth or a bit of a red herring rather than a myth. So again, in my experience, the marketing budget's usually the first thing that someone will come after, when a company's looking to make savings, and that's because
Sure.
there's discretionary spend in there, right? So My advice, and this is tongue in cheek, spend as much of your budget in Q1 as you can, so there's not much for after. But that is typically what happens, and I think the way to avoid that is to deliver results, right? And I think there's
Sure.
there's too many marketing leaders out there even that are not demonstrating the value properly of what they're delivering,
Okay.
having quantifiable evidence over what they're delivering, and the most important part of that is then going and asking for more budget.
Okay.
And that's something that I still see is really, really rare. If you give me 1 million and I turn it into 10, then I want 10 next year to turn it into
Yeah.
100. And those conversations don't happen enough. It's like, oh well, we normally get a 10% increase in budget, so we'll accept that and move on. It's like, no, if we can properly demonstrate that there's a clear return on investment, then we should go and ask for more cash. And that's something I've always done. All the finance directors that I've ever worked with will also be a testament to that as well. Um, so yeah, that's probably it on that one. It's around properly demonstrating ROI essentially.
Absolutely. And when you're thinking about developing these teams, you're looking to expand your budgets. I guess hiring is a big part of that too. I'd love to learn about your approach to hiring talent.
That's a good one. I think that world's changing as well, and we're constantly being asked as leaders, not just in marketing but across all teams, to be able to do more with less. Right. So
Right.
again, we've spoken about AI already, but that's changing the way that people are thinking about hiring and thinking about job roles and job descriptions.
Mhm.
Hiring something I actually really enjoy. I've probably hired 100, maybe 120 people in my career.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
I enjoy the process of meeting people for the first time, and my kind of key tip in hiring is always hire attitude over aptitude. So I tend to use like a 70-30 split. If someone's got a great attitude, you can work with that. If they've got a
Mhm.
terrible attitude, it's really hard to work with that.
No,
You can. I've always said you can teach someone how to do a job. You can't teach them to want to get out of bed in the morning and do that job. So I always look
absolutely.
for attitude first, and that's the most important thing when hiring, in my opinion.
And how do you measure attitude when it's not easily quantifiable?
I think when you've done it as many times as I have, it becomes fairly easy to spot. But
Okay.
some of the traits of a good attitude, curiosity. Just ask questions. The more questions you ask, the more you're going to learn. And there is a line where you can cross where people ask too many questions. But you want people in the team that are hungry, that they're interested in what's going on. They're interested in the plan. They're clear and interested in how they can help get you to that plan as well. But that curiosity piece is really, really important. If you get someone in the team that's dead silent and never asks any questions, then how are they going to learn? It just
Absolutely.
means that you're then directing the narrative. You want them to be coming up with ideas and suggestions and questions. So that's one of the measures I'd look for a good positive attitude.
Makes sense. I guess we've touched a bit on AI, and just as a final question from me, I'd love to understand how your marketing strategy is evolving over the next few years and whether there's any technology or trends that you're particularly looking at.
Yeah, so I think automation of tasks in general is something that everyone in marketing should be looking at the moment. How can we I mean, we're talking about it at the moment at Pocona. How can we automate the process from MQL to SQL? Is there
Sure.
something we can do with a piece of technology, whether it's a type form or an online survey or something that has mandatory qualification questions that, if answered within certain parameters, pushes that straight to a salesperson and not to the BDR team? So every time we do that, it means the BDRs don't have another person to call, and it means they're making outbound instead of waiting for the inbounds to come in. So
Mhm.
I think automation of tasks, being able to do more with less, and stopping the team from working on those sort of mundane and repetitive tasks is really, really important. Data, we know it's at the center of everything, always will be, whether that's web analytics or intent data or data you're getting from A/B testing. Um, that's really, really important. I think the key there, though, is to actually have someone in the team in the mark ops type role, marketing ops type role, who
Yeah.
can not just download and look at the data, but again interrogate it and use it to provide suggestions on how we can improve performance. That's the bit that nearly always gets missed. But from a
Mhm.
data point of view, we're great at collecting it. We're not great at doing anything with it. Um, and I think finally, it's probably just innovation. So I've told all of the people in my team, go and block out 2-3 hours a week to think. And
Wow.
there's so many teams I've worked in the past where you're rushing to get the next campaign out, or
Mhm.
you're in 100 internal team meetings a week and you don't have time to get out of the sort of the weeds, if you like. I've asked them all to
Sure.
go and do that because we've employed these people because they're good at what they do, and
Mhm.
they shouldn't just be good at executing, they should be good at thinking as well. So the question is, what can you do to move the needle for this business? How can we increase one of your KPIs or one of your metrics by a factor of 2 or 10 or whatever it may be, and just go away and think about it. And go to the park or go to the pub, wherever you're comfortable, but get away from your screen and those internal meetings and free up some time to think strategically. That's so important at all layers in the marketing function.
Amazing. Really appreciate your time, Gareth. This is a really interesting podcast. I definitely learned a lot, and I definitely think my listeners will too.
You're welcome. Thanks for your time.